I painted this forest scene for my Patreon subscribers to demonstrate how to create an atmosphere of morning light streaming through the trees. And the link to the full demo is in my description. Before I do a larger painting, I usually paint a few smaller studies, and that's the subject for this video, where I show you the techniques I use to create that sense of light coming through the trees. And these are the colors that I'll be using for this painting. I'll start off with a very light wash of purple mixed with just the two colors, the rose and ultramarine blue, and that's to go in the far distance. There's some mountain range there, and the main purpose for this color is to offset the warm light. Purple and yellow are complementary in the color spectrum, so that will heighten the idea of the cool distance and the warm foreground of the colors between the trees. Now I'm going to lift out a bit of that purple between the trees because we really want that to be the yellow of the sunlight. And then I move on to my yellow, which is quite a neutral yellow. It's neither cool nor warm. But I have a quinacridone gold, which is one of my favorite yellow colors that I use because, as the name suggests, it's very gold. It's got a warm glow to it. It's somewhere between a raw sienna and a burnt sienna. With some extra magic into it, and I use that quite a bit. And what I'm trying to achieve here is an interplay between warm and cool colors and a light and dark to get a real strong sense of contrast. So I am darker on the outside and lighter in the center where the sun shines through, and then also cooler in the background and cooler on the sides and in the foreground, and maximum warmth smack bang in the middle of that painting, just to heighten that sense of light coming through those couple of trees there. With my quinacridone gold, I'm just going to continue in that foreground where the sun comes and add some blue for it on that left side where not as much sunlight obviously will come through because the trees are blocking that, so that's why I cool that down. I'm coming back into my purple mix. I just added a bit of that gold color, which turns it into more of a brown, and just building up a little bit of value. And on the right side, I'm adding more blue to it. I want that to be cooler. Less sun will reach those trees there on the right side. And then I'm going to drop in a bit more of that gold color, so the tips of the trees and the shrubs will catch more sunlight and add a bit of glow to it. Same in the foreground. It's creating a very subtle texture. To start with, this is my first wash, so it's all very light, and our foundation to build for the next layer. And before that completely dries, I'm just going to add a little bit more of a blue-green in that bottom left corner, just to frame the painting. And then I'm going to let this completely dry. I'm now mixing a very strong brown. It's my darkest color, made out of the Van Dyke brown and a bit of ultramarine. And then I'm going to paint that main tree in there. And then straight away, while that's wet, I'm going to put in the gold color on the side where I want that sunlight to come in, and then a little bit of the yellow as well, just touching that outside, and then letting those two colors blend nicely. And then comes a process of lifting and adding pigment until it's just right. So I'll do the same on this tree, the shadow side with my dark color, and then with a clean brush picking up some of the gold color and then dropping that straight into the side where the sun will hit it. I've added the branch there that will catch that sunlight. At this point it looks a bit daft. Most watercolors have that stage where you doubt yourself, it doesn't look good, you wonder, is this ever going to turn out right? Trust me, I definitely was ready to abandon this painting right here now. I didn't like my trees. But you just got to push through and then see what turns out in the end. So they don't just look like sticks coming out of nowhere. I'm grounding them now with a bit of that same color, just connecting that with the foreground. Here's an attempt of lifting out some of the pigment, seeing if I can create a better light effect there, but you can see that that is not quite as successful as I'd hoped. It looks more like fingerprints. So back in with my dark color. But while it's wet, we can keep pushing, pulling, lifting, and adding without any risk. A couple of minutes later, we are now sort of happy with the trees. I'm adding a bit of ultramarine blue there to that shadow side. And continue to layer my mid-ground shrubbery. And I want to have that a little bit cooler than the rest of the painting, just to create the illusion of the sunlight not reaching over there. And continue to connect my trees into the foreground. And then I'm going to paint my next tree with the same color mix, ultramarine blue, Van Dyke brown. That makes it almost black. And you can see I should have waited a little bit longer. It runs into the ultramarine I just put down. But that's okay, that's watercolor for you. Gotta just go with the flow, literally. I'm mixing a purpley grey to connect that tree into some foreground shenanigans. This is a study, so this was my prep work for the larger painting. So this is where I experiment with textures and shapes and colors and values. So I'm not afraid to make mistakes. Every painting is a lesson learned and a step to the next one. I pushed my mix into more of a purple color. And as you can see, I'm now painting the shadows. While the base of the trees are still wet, I want the shadows and the objects to connect. That always makes it look a lot more organic and natural. Trying to make something out of this foreground shape there. I'm not liking it at all at this point, but once again, I'll just have to keep going with it and see if I can turn that around. The main thing I came to do here was to create that light coming through those two trees, which at this point doesn't quite look like it. So a little bit more work to do, but hope what you can see here in this video is that you just keep going, persevere with your idea and your vision, and then just see what you can do to move towards that. Now I'm coming back to the right hand side where I want to add a bit more shadow into that area and create that contrast between warm and cool of the top of the trees that are catching the sunlight and the bottom, and then going from darker on the outside to lighter towards the center, continuing to emphasize where the light comes from. Strengthening some of the darker sides of my trees, because light always needs a lot of shadow. I generally like to scratch out highlights with a palette knife or a credit card while the pigment is still a little bit wet, and that also adds some nice texture. And then I'm also scratching out some highlights in that foreground. That's mostly dry, so now I've moved on with my dagger brush, which has got a really fine point, great for detailed work. And I'm just popping in some darker leaves coming in from the top. That serves a few purposes. It extends the painting beyond the frame. It creates another layer of light and dark contrast, but also adds some additional textures and breaks up the strong verticals from the trees. And a few little leaves in yellow just catching the sunlight. And with a pale blue-grey, a few more leaves behind the trees, just to break up the empty space and create a bit more visual interest. something's missing on that right hand side. So I'm popping in a couple of more smaller trees to create more energy into the painting. And then a few details, because that's the focal point there. That should have the highest contrast and it should have the most amount of detail. And then I let that dry, and then I'm going to step back and see what else it needs. And that foreground is a bit nondescript, so I'm picking up my fan brush that has amazing texture and create some random shrubbery there. A few splatters while we're at it to top it all off. Bit of white gouache, creating more of the texture. Generally just having a bit of fun to finish off my painting. A few more darks here and there. And a little bit more yellow, a few more golden highlights here and there. I could have stopped probably 10 minutes ago, but you know, why stop when you're having fun? Just once more, this is a study. This is where I learn, where I prepare myself for a bigger painting and see what works and what doesn't. A few final splatters and I'm finished. Off comes the tape. This study really helped me get familiar with the subject, practice some of the techniques, and made painting the bigger version so much easier. Hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for watching.